So I was getting ready to go out on my first whale watching tour. It happened to be in Alaska, and this was one of those really good small boat, small group, locally owned operations. In this case, it was out of Hoona, Alaska. Icy Strait Point is the cruise ship stop that gets you there. And, these are the kinds of tour whale watching operations that I like. They get results. The owners and operators of the boats live in the area. They've usually lived in the area their whole life. They know the water's like the back of their hands. They know where the whales are because they're out every day. They know how to get how to get you to see the whales, to photograph the whales, and so on and so forth. Only this trip started massively unexpectedly and way before, well, not way before, but before we even left the dock. So what's up, everybody? I'm Jason, and welcome back to the channel. So this is the third episode in my series of the story behind the picture, and in this picture we are looking at a dockside humpback, or the picture a dockside humpback. So the story behind this is that I was in Alaska, first cruise. It was early May 2015, or mid-May 2015, and the cruise that we were on stopped at Hoona, Alaska, or Icy Strait Point is the cruise stop calls it, and we had just gone through Glacier Bay and we were stopping here. And obviously there's all kinds of excursions on these boats, but one of the ones that really struck me that looked interesting was a whale watching tour, small boat, locally owned, locally operated, etc. That was like, I think 6 people on the boat, plus the driver or something like that. It was real small groups. I like these kinds of things because you talk to the drivers, you talk to people, you don't have people pushing you out of the way, and in a small boat with an outboard engine that they can start and stop, they can take you out and we're somewhere where there are whales and they can shut the motor off and sit there. And obviously they are going to comply with all the federal regulations on how close they can get and all that kind of stuff. But the whales are far less likely to move away and from where the boat is when it's a little boat with no engine on and it's basically just sitting in the water, versus when it's, a big catamaran with big diesel engines that they can't just shut off. So we were just getting down to the boat. We were just getting ready to get on, starting to talk about the safety briefing, where the life jackets were, etc. We weren't even on the boat at this point. So we were really just talking a little bit about like where we were planning to go and so forth. And all of a sudden, right off the dock, a massive school of bait fish just start trying to turn into birds. I mean, they're ripping out of the water as hard as they can. And of course, that immediately prompted me to take my camera, which I already had out and prepped, grab my camera, swing it up, and point it and focus it on that location, or start focusing it on that location. And in the time that it took me to swing my camera up and start shooting, or start getting ready to shoot, this humpback just comes out of the water, full mouth open, feeding lunge, and I was nowhere near fast enough to shoot it, even with the heads up of the fact that there were these fish jumping out of the water. And this was completely unexpected for me. The depth where the boat was like 35, 40 feet, something like that. So way less than 20 meters. Totally, maybe like, 10 to 15 meters, something like that, I think is what it ends up being. Totally unexpected. The guide didn't expect it. Nobody else was even ready. There were 2 of us that were photographers that basically got the end of the feeding lunge, and that was about it. So total, just amazing situation, and it was happening like we didn't even have to go out. We were right there at the dock. In fact, we were standing on the dock. So let's talk a little bit about the technical aspects behind this image. Shot with a Canon EOS 5D Mark III. That was my best camera at the time. Exposure settings were 2500th of a second, f7.1, ISO 400. Lens I was using was a 100 to 400 Mark II with a 1.4 teleconverter. So the situation in terms of focal length, this actually was shot at a 100 or 264 millimeters. It was way too wide or way too tight. I needed to be wider. I really needed to not have the teleconverter on the lens, and as a matter of purpose. But that was just kind of the unexpected situation, because anytime you're photographing whales, there's a minimum distance that you have to maintain from them as a whale watching boat, or any other boat really. And so I was expecting to have to be photographing stuff 100 feet away or more, and not like from the dock, essentially, or I should say like 300 feet away or more, and not like from the dock. So 264 millimeters is what the total focal length ended up being. It was about 188 millimeters set on the zoom, plus the 40% increase from the teleconverter. And based on the focus information, the camera logs, which on the 5D Mark III, it kind of gives you a range. It doesn't give you an actual distance. The range that it logged was about 139 to 177 feet, or basically 42.3 to 54 meters, give or take. Where in that actually everything fell, I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that, like I said, I was way over lensed for this situation. So as I said, I used the EF 100 to 400 f4.5 to 5.6 LIS2 USM for this shot. And at this point, I had replaced my first generation one with this one. It's a much better lens than the first generation one. It's sharper, better image quality, better weather sealing. It's not completely weather sealed like a internal focusing lens would be, but better weather sealing to the point that I didn't have to worry about failures or dust or something like that, and didn't have the running problem the Mark I had of having the bearings potentially jam up. Now, I put a teleconverter on this because my expectation is that again, I don't like doing a lot of lens changing in the field if I can avoid it. It's slow. This is one of the things that having like a 200 to 400 with the built-in teleconverter that you just have to flip a switch is so much nicer. But it's slow, and it also exposes the camera and lens to dust and spray and contamination that you don't really want in the camera. So I figured, since probably not going to get very close to the whales, I'll put the teleconverter on when I leave the cruise ship, while I'm in the room, and just carry it out like that and not have a real problem with it. Well, obviously the problem here was that I was over lensed for this situation, and even though I was trying to zoom the whole thing back wider, I'm not even sure why I wasn't zoomed back to 100 to start with. But as I was trying to zoom the situation back, and I see this in the progression, the focal lengths of the progression of images, just totally over lens. And it cost me in this situation, because this is a rare opportunity. Feeding lunges are not something, I've only seen them on this whale watching trip. I've never seen them on any other whale watching trip, which of course, if you're out whale watching trip, running trips all the time, that's not going to be a problem. But when you're just going out on occasion, that's something that's going to be pretty rare, and totally missed the ball on it. So post-processing for this is basically nothing. I didn't crop it. I didn't, mess with clarity or contrast or anything like that. This is pretty much how it came out of the camera, other than raw processing and I think the Adobe Vivid or Adobe Standard image style for the picture that I was, rendering essentially. So the lesson that I wanted to talk about with this image and why I'm talking about this, and something that came up again in a future trip to Alaska, is the importance of being observant and also the importance of sort of learning and understanding your subject's behaviors. So things that it can do or things that it does regularly. So I've always said this, when you're doing wildlife photography, you're always behind the curve. You're always reacting and not acting. So you don't know when the bird or whale is going to come. You can put yourself in a position to maximize your chances with that, but when push comes to shove, the whale, when it's exactly going to come up or how it's going to come up, or whether it's going to breach or lunge or just surface and dive back down again, doesn't you don't have any control over that. So you have to be on the lookout for little tells to help you figure out what's going on. So for example, in the case of ospreys, so they're the only one of the few species of raptor that fish. And they have a huge tell when they're about to dive on a fish, which is they kind of pull up and stall, and they end up looking straight down almost. And if you see that happening and you're a photographer, that's when you want to get the camera up and on the bird if you want to be able to shoot it fishing and taking off and so forth. Little behavior, it happens very quickly. It happens very fast. Not for very long before the osprey either dives on the fish or decides that it wasn't a fish and it continues to forage. In the case of whales, things to look for are things like circling seabirds. If you see a column of seabirds circling over an area, there's a good chance there's in a place where there's like known whale activity. So like, if you're in Alaska, the entire inside passage from basically Vancouver Island to the Aleutian Islands, there's tons of whales in that area. They come up there in the summer to feed, and so they're always on the lookout for food. So if you see something like a flock of birds circling a small area, that's a tell that there's probably a school of fish under it, and that's a good reason or chance to start looking for looking at that situation if you can see it, because you're probably going to see feeding behavior there. The other one is like the obvious, in this case, small fish jumping out of the water. Well, small fish don't jump out of the water unless they're being chased by something. When it's a big school of small fish jumping out of the water, it's probably something big chasing them. And that was the tell in this situation. The other aspect of this is really learning as much as you can about the behavior of the subjects that you're shooting. So that can help immensely with basically managing, well, in some cases, basically getting a shot, but in other cases, managing fatigue. So most of us that are photographers, I think it's probably safe to say, regardless of how much Call of Duty we play on the Xbox or whatever, we're not trained snipers, and we do not have the physical conditioning and mental conditioning to sit looking, holding our camera up, looking through the lens at a specific spot for hours on end to get the shot. So we need to be able to manage sort of when we're looking for something versus when we actually have the camera up, or when we're just being more comfortable and like using binoculars or just our eyes. So this is one of those places where learning how and when you can take breaks or be able to take breaks. So a specific tip that was I picked up with respect to humpbacks or humpback whales is they tend to dive consistently or for consistent times. So I learned this from a naturalist in the San Juan Islands when I was doing a whale watching thing there. And you would get 2 or 3 quick dives where the whale would come up, breathe, dive back down, maybe for 30 seconds, come up, breathe again, dive back down, and then, you know, if there were a couple of whales, they often are doing this sort of synchronized. And then they would dive, and this would be the big, deep, foraging, hunting dive. And what the naturalist was doing on the whale watching trip in the San Juan Islands was they would start a stopwatch when the whale dived at the beginning of the trip, and they would say, okay, it looks like these whales are diving for about 10 minutes, let's just say. And therefore, I knew that when the whales looked like they were going down on a foraging dive, I had 5 or 6 minutes that I didn't have to have the camera up, and I didn't have to be on, you know, full sharp lookout to see where the whales were and what was going on. So I could relax, take a breath, and then at like 8 minutes into the 10 minutes, because they don't always time their dives perfectly, they don't use stopwatches, 8 minutes into the 10 minutes, I would pick the camera back up and I would start really diligently looking for where the whales would come up. Interestingly, this was something that never came up. I never saw any of the whale watching tour guide people or boat captains or anything in Alaska, you know, ever talk about this or do it, because they never had a stopwatch out and they never were timing anything. But it really made, and of course in a lot of situations in Alaska, there's so many whales that are on their own little dive schedules that it just doesn't matter. You know, when there's 10 whales around the boat, there's constantly whales coming up and going down. But when there's only a handful of whales, this is a really useful practice that, you know, to have. But the combination of sort of being observant, learning the tells, and then learning what your subject is tends to do, definitely goes a long way to helping you sort of claw back on the curve of being purely reactive when you're talking about wildlife photography. So that is the story behind a dockside whale. And if you like this or found it interesting or useful, let me know by hitting the thumbs up button. If this kind of thing seems like it might be your kind of thing, please consider subscribing if you're not already. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.